Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers. So I'm Laura.
I'm Elizabeth.
And my neighbors, you can also probably hear them too. I apologize for that, but apartment living, what can you do?
Yeah.
So we're here today to talk to you about a little something called an MLM. But before we get started with that, we're both kind of trying to get back into making videos for YouTube. Do you want to tell them a bit about like the channel we had before?
Yeah, we had a channel. It was called The Sufficient Seven. It was kind of like an inside joke. Laura and I have been friends since freshman year of college, which was a while ago.
Almost 8 years ago now.
We don't like to think about it. And so we decided to start a channel to talk about books because we both love to read. And so we did. We did that for like 2-ish years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not that long.
But we started when we were roommates back like junior year.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the channel mostly talked about, I think it was mostly like book reviews or like book hauls, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and back then I think in general the YouTube community was like, still a little bit smaller than it is now. It's kind of like really boomed recently with even more content creators than there were like 6-7 years ago. So we started wanting to make videos again, but this time we kind of wanted to broaden the scope of what we talk about. So in this video, we're both here together, but I think at one point, we might make different channels and collab with each other. In general, we still sometimes might talk about books, but there are a lot of other things that we're kind of obsessed with too, whether they're pop culture things or, culty things or MLM related things. So at this point, I don't really know if we've found a niche for the type of videos we want to make, but we're just kind of starting back out.
Yeah.
And so for those of you who might like more content from us, we just made some awesome margaritas that we're drinking, and we just made a video on how to make said margaritas. We both really like them, so if you'd like this margarita recipe, it will be linked up, I don't know, here somewhere.
I don't remember how to do this.
It'll be linked. You'll find it. They're really delicious. But anyway, like we said today, we're going to be talking about MLMs, basically what they are. If you've never heard that term before, you will know at the end of the video. Their origins and the kind of heated debate, shall we say, between the pro and anti MLM community, because I will say in this topic, on the spectrum of love to hate, people are really polarized around both ends. There aren't many people who are neutral about MLMs.
No.
You either love them or hate them. And so I'm going to try to cite some of the sources that I've used for this, since I've, done a little bit of research, but some of it honestly is just kind of like rattling around in my head from years of kind of figuring out about this stuff. Because for me, I think my mom was actually involved in an MLM when I didn't know what an MLM was. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people. Like, they hear about a business opportunity and they don't necessarily realize they were potentially part of a scam until many years later. And that's one of those terms that people in the anti-MLM community think is accurate. People who love MLMs hate the fact that they're called scams or pyramid schemes. So anyway, I guess my first question for you is like, when did you first hear about MLMs, or multi-level marketing as it's called?
That's a good question. I feel like I knew about MLMs before I knew the MLM name. I follow a lot of like beauty gurus on Instagram and YouTube. Not all of them are on both platforms. But Lip Sense was huge back in the day, probably like 2015, 2016. And if you don't know what Lip Sense is, their product is this like lip gloss that like doesn't come off your lips. Like no matter what you do, it'll stay on all day. So I don't know, it seems like a good product. I've never used it. But I remember like a bunch of these beauty gurus were posting all these things like, come join my team. Like I'm making like 6 figures a year, and I'm like, oh my god, like here I am, like a broke college student, like hell yeah. I want to do that. But it seemed like too much time and work, and it was way too much money to even set up. So I feel like I've heard about things like that over the years, like what LuLaRoe or like LuLaRoe, yeah.
That's a big one.
I don't know if these are MLMs, but I know I've gone to like pampered chefs parties that my aunt has had.
They are.
Yeah. Or I remember going to one when I was like really young with my mom to one of my cousins for like selling candles. So I feel like it's been around for a long time, and I've heard pyramid scheme more than MLM, but at some point I think maybe you or like I saw a YouTube video on my own, someone sent me something about MLMs, and I'm like, oh, interesting. Like I finally have a name for what I've been seeing all these years.
Yeah, and I feel like this is one of those topics that people get super into, and it becomes kind of like an obsession thing. So that kind of fits into, I guess, some of the content that I find interesting and definitely want to make more videos about. But anyway, so MLM, like we said, stands for multi-level marketing, and it's sometimes called, network marketing. Direct sales could be part of an MLM, but not all direct sales companies are MLMs. And now, I guess I would say some younger people are kind of trying to rebrand it and calling it social selling or like social media selling, because I really do think social media has changed the game in such a huge way for how these companies used to operate. But I think one thing that does tend to happen is that MLM has kind of like a negative stigma around it. So over time, people come up with new names for the same thing so that people don't hear that little like dog whistle and be like, scam. Yeah. Anyway, way back in the day, and we're talking like 1800s going into 1900s is kind of, where like the birth of MLMs came from. Because back at that time, there were still a lot of like door-to-door salesmen in what we would call direct sales, like someone is selling a vacuum cleaner and they go door to door, like an encyclopedia, and they're like, isn't this great? You want to buy one of these? I bet you do.
It's like snake oil salesman?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So like that kind of thing. And just like you said, snake oil salesman, that's a generally negative term. And a lot of these direct sales men, because the profession was pretty much all men, really started to get a bad reputation. And this could be because the product they were selling wasn't that good, or, because they're like traveling salesmen, it's not really like you could return it because they'd just be gone. They'd leave town and you would kind of just be stuck with like a crappy thing. So a lot of these salesmen got kind of like a bad reputation over time. Yeah. Also, for some people, they might not really want to like welcome a man into their house if it's just like a woman. But back in this day, like not that many women worked, so the business was kind of dominated by men. And so as the tide was turning and this type of business practice seemed to be like unfavorable in some people's eyes, and there were more and more, department stores like Sears where you could get everything at one place. Yeah. The kind of heyday of direct sales, door-to-door salesmen started to wane. And so a lot of people were trying to figure out how could they still make money off of this business model? How could they still make it profitable? It needs to change somehow. And that's kind of how MLMs were started, like back in the 1800s still. Wow. So do you know what claims to be the oldest MLM? There are a couple that claim to be the oldest, but no, it's really famous. I'll give you a hint. Ding dong.
Not my first one is dictionary, so like encyclopedia milk. Milk. I'm joking. I'm thinking of a milkman.
Yeah. It's Avon. They had like that ad that was like ding dong, Avon calling. Cause like
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah, so that was like really popular in the 50s, I think it was a commercial.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That makes sense because I feel like Avon's like always been there. I know people would give us like pamphlets at school to like buy from them. Yeah. Interesting.
So Avon is one of those that did still kind of start with like door to doors. That's the whole thing, like ding dong Avon calling, because the Avon ladies still kind of went door to door, and they might have parties, but like door to door sales was a big thing.
Okay.
Yeah, and so Avon's website right now is celebrating 135 years.
Wow.
So they date their founding back to 1886. Even though I don't think they rebranded as Avon until like 1936. I think that's when it was. And so actually I'll have linked below this interesting link on Avon's website that has different ads through different decades. And some of them are pretty cool because it goes back to like the 1920s and you can see different like Avon ads, and some of them look cool. Don't condone Avon, but old-timey ads are interesting to me.
Yeah. So
you can kind of see how it changes through the years. And so for those who don't know, Avon, mostly sells makeup, perfume, beauty products, that sort of stuff.
You ever bought anything from Avon?
No.
I definitely have. Back in like 6th grade, my friend and I got stuff because someone in our neighborhood was selling it.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't remember I think it was just like lipstick or lip gloss. Like it wasn't, I didn't buy like a whole thing. Yeah.
So when I went to high school for a while, sold Mary Kay, which is another makeup MLM.
Yeah.
And I don't really go on Facebook much anymore, but I do remember when I did, like, all her posts were just about Mary Kay and, like, trying to sell Mary Kay. And I felt so bad. Because that's the type of job that I would hate. I would hate trying to sell people stuff all the time. Or to join your team.
I know.
But anyway, that type of, Avon model became successful because a lot of the time the people who would be buying these products were women, like it was geared to women.
Yeah.
And so women selling to women was more of like a trust thing. A lot of them felt more comfortable accepting women into their houses. And a lot of things like this were gaining steam at a time when more women wanted to enter the workplace, like after World War II, like they might have had a job and then they wanted to find another way to like get out of the house, maybe make a little bit of extra money. And back at this time, I guess I don't have the research to support this, but it seems like some of these MLMs were, still predatory in a certain way. Like people didn't really make a lot of money, but they weren't making wild claims like, you'll be a millionaire. It was just like, have a little bit of extra pocket change.
Oh, okay.
And so some people might have made a little bit of extra pocket change. A lot of people still, kind of lost money doing them. Mm-hmm. However, there's a lot of, research about these kind of early days of MLMs or direct selling. So in part of my research, I kind of came across Tracy Deutsch, who's a history professor at the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
And she was talking about some of those, gendered aspects of early network marketing. Like I was mentioning why, women might have felt safer with other women. And still today, I think this statistic is that something like 75% of people in MLMs are women.
Wow.
And then if you think of some companies, a lot of the reason why the men come in is because their wives do it. So a large percentage of men in MLMs are actually brought in because of the women in their lives that are in MLMs. So it is really one of those industries that's kind of like by women, for women. And now today there's all that like boss babe, female empowerment stuff. Really, it's just a way to scam vulnerable women a lot of the time. And even back in these early days, a lot of these very first MLMs were started by men, but they staffed women. And also you could pay women less. And like, it was a lot easier to just pay women a lot less to do this kind of direct selling work that they used to have men do.
Interesting.
One other thing that this history professor talks about is that, if you're looking at money as the only benefit from these early MLMs, you're really missing a lot of the picture. And that carries over into today because all of this, like social affirmation and maybe time with your friends, because if you're in an MLM, you're expected to like become a part of this community and bring in all your family and friends as well. Mm-hmm. So all of that kind of like community bonding and maybe like the fact to like justify a party, like old like Tupperware, Mary Kay parties. I feel like in the modern MLM, there's a little bit less of that, but that was a huge thing for a while, like product parties.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of the time it was just kind of like an excuse to hang out with friends and like maybe someone would buy something, but you weren't necessarily trying to make it your career. So it wasn't like as hard of a financial hit if you didn't make any money because you got to hang out with your friends and like it was, kind of like, oh, it was for this little business. And so it was kind of a way to be frivolous without feeling frivolous.
Yeah.
Maybe something to get you out of the house, feeling fulfilled by the hobby. And many of those things made the experience worth it for some women. that's why some women today still feel like an MLM is worth it if they're not trying to do it full time. But in my opinion, a lot of these tactics are what keep MLMers invested today, even though the financial aspect can be so much more of a hardship, because a lot of MLMs today are really predatory in that way, in that they might make you spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on the product that they want you to sell to people, and that wasn't the case way back in the day. So in that way, some things have changed. And then along with the really positive social side of MLMs is that it can be like a cult. There can be so much social pressure that if you leave, you essentially get like excommunicated from everyone who's still inside the MLM. So these tactics of like sisterhood and togetherness work in the opposite way too. You know, if you ever want to leave, like, you're betraying your MLM family. Well, there's a lot of that. And that's something that we talked about with like cults and how we find those interesting. And
yeah.
MLMs are kind of cult-like in a way.
Yeah, they are. There's that HBO show. What's the name of it again?
About NXIVM?
Yeah.
Oh, The Vow.
The Vow.
Yeah.
That is really good. It's about NXIVM, which is like an MLM selling like self-improvement classes, essentially. And kind of like how that became a cult, and like a lot of the like key members in that group of people. It's really good if you're interested.
Yeah, that's one of those like perfect crossovers, because the leader, like, he started in Amway actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
Or like he was in Amway at one point, or like did some other direct selling network marketing things, and then yes, Keith Raniere ended up being basically the leader of a cult that was also an MLM in a weird way. So it's just like a perfect mesh of the two things.
Now I believe he's in jail.
Yes, yes. Now that we've talked a little bit about the history of an MLM, I kind of want to just define it a little bit more. I wanted to discuss a few of the component parts that make up the definition for an MLM, which is a type of business model. So MLMs distribute or partially distribute products by selling them to a consultant who then sells them to a customer. So if you hear someone in an MLM saying like, I run my own business, it's because they buy products from the MLM and then, like I said, in turn sell them to customers. So MLMers equate this to like if you have a boutique or something, and you might buy a product wholesale from a distributor and then you sell it out of your boutique. So they say like, I'm a small business owner, because they buy their products from the MLM and then they sell it themselves. In reality, they're just more of a contracted salesperson. They're not a business owner. The tax forms that they fill out are for, contracted salespeople.
Okay.
So that's kind of one of those misconceptions that I really hate when they equate themselves to small business owners. They do that all the time, and they talk about my business. Like, it's not your business. You just sell for a company. It's their business that they're using you for. But anyway, and then another thing that generally happens in an MLM is that they pay their non-employees, their consultants, contracted salespeople, they pay them a commission on their sales. And then they also pay consultants commission on the sales made by people they recruit, which is called your downline. And so this is one of those things where it starts to get really thorny, because we're going to be talking about how this is similar to a pyramid scheme. So MLM companies, swear that they are not pyramid schemes, because pyramid schemes are illegal. So what I just mentioned about consultants being paid commission off of their downline is really how we get into this comparison between MLMs and pyramid schemes. So at this point, it would be really helpful to define what a pyramid scheme is. So in the simplest terms, a pyramid scheme is a business model that pays members higher up in the structure by funds from new members. So essentially, it relies on members recruiting more and more people to prop itself up. So for example, if I get invited to a group that says, give me $1,500 as a buy-in and eventually you'll get a big return on investment, that could seem promising. The catch is I have to recruit other people and each get them to give me $1,500 each. So for example, if I recruit 6 people and get them to give me $1,500 each, now I have $9,000. Awesome. Although a cut of that money goes to the person that brought me in. And then if you imagine that you take away your initial investment, you still have like well over $5,000, which is like, wow, I have a great return on my investment. However, if you tell your recruiters that they each have to find 6 new people and then they each have to find 6 new people, once you get to like 13 levels, you run out of enough people on Earth.
Oh my God.
It becomes unsustainable really, really quickly.
Wow.
And so these just like funnel money straight to the top. But there's the person at the end always loses out. And there's always going to be a person at the end. And that's the thing that happens to 99% of people who join an MLM. They're at the bottom. They didn't get in early enough. They didn't get in before the market became saturated. But then you have the people like me in this hypothetical scenario who made a return on investment. They're up at the top and they're like, I don't know what you were complaining about. This system works. It worked for me. If it didn't work for you, you just didn't try hard enough. And so they really just kind of ignore the exponential math and then just try to make it your problem, because if it were a problem with the system, then they'd have to admit that it's a scam. And that's one thing that happens in MLMs all the time. Anything good that comes to you comes because of the MLM. Anything bad that happens to you is your own fault.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's another great tactic to make sure that people don't report what's going on because they're ashamed and embarrassed and they think it's their fault. And the reason that a lot of these things continue is because people don't report it to the FTC, because if they lose money, they think it's their fault. They think that they didn't try hard enough, because there are people who actually, make money, but they're just scammers, or they got in earlier at the right time. So by using all these psychological tactics to make you feel guilty and turn all of this shame around on yourself, it's another way that MLMs perpetuate, because they make it so that when you leave, you don't blame the MLM, you blame yourself.
Yeah. Interesting. Mm-hmm. It's kind of terrible.
It's really terrible.
Yeah.
It's awful. It's horrible.
It's sad because I know people invest a lot of money into getting product, then they just never sell it. So it's like, I think I was watching like a Samantha Bee special on MLMs, and this one was like, I have like 10 grand of like LuLaRoe leggings in my basement, and it's like, what? Because you're never going to make that money back. So it's just a lot of sunk costs. And I don't know if people are paying out of pocket or if they're like charging it, but like, I mean, regardless, it's pretty awful.
Yeah, you like segued beautifully into my next point. So thank you for that. So now that we know what a pyramid scheme is, it's like, how is that associated with an MLM? Because MLMers will tell you pyramid schemes don't have products, so we're not a pyramid scheme, because pyramid schemes in the barest sense just revolve around money. So MLMers say that we have a product and that's where we make our money. We make our money by selling products, not by recruiting people. But if you actually look at the amount of income that they get from selling a product, it's like pennies compared to what they get by recruiting people. And then also they love to say that pyramid schemes are illegal, so we can't be a pyramid scheme. And it's like, wow, I love to live in a world where murder is illegal, so murder doesn't happen.
It's not true.
It's like, just because something's a crime doesn't mean someone's not doing it. Like, Bernie Madoff got away with his scheme for years and years before people figured it out.
Yeah.
So if someone in an MLM says a pyramid scheme is illegal, therefore we can't be a pyramid scheme, that's kind of the easiest thing to debunk in the world. And like I just mentioned, these crimes are really rarely reported because people blame themselves. So that's a way that they're able to, get away with it. But so like you mentioned, front-loading product, like product stocking, is one way that kind of tips regulators off that you might be an MLM if you have a bunch of merchandise that you can't sell. So I'm actually going to read a little bit of a quote from Deborah A. Valentine, who's the formal general counsel at the FTC. And so she gave a speech that kind of outlines some of these points, and I will link this in the description below as well. So she says that pyramid schemes now come in so many forms that they may be difficult to recognize immediately. However, they all share one overriding characteristic. They promise consumers or investors large profits, primarily based on recruiting others to join their program, not based on profits from any real investment or real sale of goods to the public. Some schemes may purport to sell a product, but they often simply use their product to hide their pyramid structure. There are two telltale signs that a product is simply being used to disguise a pyramid scheme: inventory loading and lack of retail sales. Inventory loading occurs when a company's incentive programs force recruits to buy more products than they could ever sell, often at inflated prices. And if this occurs throughout the company's distribution system, the people at the top of the pyramid reap real financial products, because every time someone in your downline buys something, regardless of whether or not they sell it to someone else, you get money. Oh. Your upline gets money whenever you make a sale, even if you're just purchasing stuff that sits in your garage forever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, like, it works. It only works for the people at the top. So, yeah, people at the bottom make excessive payments for inventory that simply accumulates in their basements. A lack of retail sales is also a red flag that a pyramid exists. Many pyramid schemes will claim that their product is selling like hotcakes. However, on closer examination, the sales occur only between people inside the pyramid structure or to new recruits joining the structure, not to consumers outside the general public. And so that's the other thing. A lot of people in MLMs will say, we sell to so many people, we have a customer base of like 1 million people. Mm-hmm. I mean, a good example of this is Monat or Monate. Have you heard of them before? Yep. Yeah. So they do shampoo.
Yep.
And so I believe the statistic that I've heard before, I don't know if this has been updated, but they used to say this, is that they had about 462,000 people in the business, and that they had a consumer base of about 1.5 million people. So you're telling me that you are able to make a living by selling to an average of 3 people shampoo? Because if you have 462,000 people in the scheme, then even if they don't buy any for themselves, on average, that number multiplied by 3 is your customer base.
Oh, God.
Like, you cannot make a living.
No.
Yeah, only selling shampoo to 3 people.
No.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's really just people inside the pyramid scheme buying up all the product, because it gets them to rank up, or someone wants their downline to buy it because they rank up. And so it's really just those two things, like inventory loading and then a closed system. So you're not selling to people outside. Only people down at the bottom of the pyramid are buying the merchandise, which then makes the funds just flow directly back up to the top of the pyramid. And that's another thing too about the commission structure. It is really kind of messed up. Most MLMs don't have a normal commission structure. Like you as the associate will make a commission on it, but then a big chunk of it, like let's say, you make 10% commission, but then another 10% will be taken out because your upline needs 1% and their upline needs 1% and their upline needs 1% and their upline needs 1%. So you do make commission, but everyone on top of you in the chain makes commission as well. So that's why the products are so expensive in an MLM, because they need enough money to kind of work through that commission structure for, the 5 levels of uplines that there are or whatnot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I assume the person at the top is getting the most money.
Yeah, because they have the most people under them as well. And so it all flows back up.
So if you had 13 people down, you'd still make money from that 13th person?
Yeah, you could do nothing and yeah.
Oh my God.
I mean, and there are, I will say that's not correct in every MLM, because there are some that kind of cap it. So I know, actually I think it was It might have been the one that did Lip Sense, because I was
Okay.
listening to a podcast the other day.
Genesense?
Something like that.
It's like Senegence, I think.
Yeah.
They have other makeup products,
Yeah.
but like the Lip Sense was like
a popular one.
yeah.
So I think they capped it at 5. So like after
okay.
like 5 levels, that was all they did. But the person who I was listening, or the person who was on the podcast, I think was in LuLaRoe, and she was like, "Oh, that's interesting because they didn't do that for us."
Interesting.
Yeah. So the other thing is too, like MLMs will claim that their products are so much more expensive because like they're better. But honestly, it's for that reason they need them to be really expensive so that they can work through that commission structure. But then also when the distributor buys them, they're not buying them at a usual wholesale price. It'll, you know, if you buy like lipstick or makeup in general whole price, I believe it's marked up like 78% or something to go to market. It's closer to like 20% in MLMs. So when the people inside the scheme are buying these products, they're already at inflated prices, and that's because they've just given the MLM their money. Like that's it.
Wow.
It doesn't need to be sold again because you already gave them the money when you paid for it yourself.
So you selling it is just making your money back.
Not even. Not
That's
even.
insane.
Because like I said, it's only like 20% more or something.
So it's like you're just
yeah. Yeah, and so that's the thing too, like all these sales of new recruits signing up, like you could never sell anything and you've just given the MLM like hundreds to thousands of dollars. Like LuLaRoe, I think for a while their base package to buy in was almost $5,000.
My God.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do not. I don't have $5,000 to just like throw.
Oh no, but see, the people who don't have the money, you need this more than anyone else.
Oh, I see,
you need it
Mm-hmm.
because you're in a desperate financial situation. So this is actually more important to you because you need the money. So you do what you have to do. You open another credit card, you borrow money from your mom. Like that's the type of thing that they will tell you, which is of course complete BS.
Yeah.
They just want to make money off of you.
Makes sense.
Yes.
We should do a thing where we buy a bunch of MLM products and review them.
See, I've thought about that.
I don't want to support them.
I don't want to support
Yeah.
them, and they're so expensive.
I will say the Pampered Chef stuff we've gotten, I think is actually good. Like,
yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It seems like a lot of these products, like they actually work, or like they're not bad, but like it's the whole like structure of the company that's
Yeah. So one
essentially illegal.
thing I would consider doing in a future video is that sometimes you can find these products on like eBay.
Oh.
And so at that point they're already being sold for like a really low amount because, you know, the people are just trying to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point it's kind of like, I feel like usually if they're selling them on eBay, they're already out of the company or something.
Probably.
They're just
trying to get rid of it.
Yeah. So I would do that if I could find a way to like get my hands on some of this inventory.
Well, I'm on it.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to try Lip Sense because I was around. They had talking about like product. They had a product shortage, but I don't know if people knew if that product shortage was real because they were like, we have a product shortage, and so everyone would run and buy like all this product. So then you had all these members who had all this product that they couldn't sell, which seemed kind of like a tactic to get people, like just to make money off of their own people buying Lip Sense or whatever makeup product they're buying from the company.
100%.
Yeah.
I should send you the link to the podcast that I was listening to because it's Life After MLM by Roberta Blevins, who was in LuLaRoe and was in the Vice documentary about LuLaRoe.
Oh, really?
And so she was interviewing someone who sold for that MLM, and they were joking about the shortage and how like miraculously like the next week they had stock again. So that's only honestly a brief amount of all of my feelings about MLMs because there's so much.
I think it's fascinating when you get into each MLM and like
Yes.
what makes that company that way, or just like I don't know, being around when I was on Instagram looking at all the Lip Sense stuff, I've been obsessed with like what actually happened because like all of a sudden they all stopped talking about it, like no one was really doing it. I remember at one point, like, I followed a bunch of beauty gurus who all went to the same conference. Like, they were clearly the top sellers, and they all were gifted, like, a trip to the Caribbean, which, yeah, that's awesome if you're one of those people, but that's, like, not most of the company. That was awarded to, like, 6 people or, like, some small number like that. So, I don't know. They're fascinating, I'm confused how so many are still around and not like being taken down by the FTC. I mean, you were SEC,
FTC, yeah. Well, I also have videos about that too, because the thing is, MLMs have been protected specifically by the government for many years. I really want to do a video about Amway and basically the lawsuit that was brought against them and how it was kind of thrown out in a very BS way, or like they lost. And so now pretty much any MLM is just like, oh, we're like Amway. Yeah, but so no, and people like high up in the government are really favorable towards MLMs. Kamala Harris did a speech for Herbalife at least once, I know that.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, so it's people on both sides of the aisle who have been very favorable towards MLMs at different points in their history because they're powerful and they have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And a lot of MLMers will be like, oh, we're $1 billion industry. It's like, yeah, a couple people at the top have money.
Yeah.
And they use a lot of that to lobby. And in the last couple of years, there's been a lot more money spent on lobbying.
Interesting.
I want to do a video about that. I want to do videos about different MLMs specifically.
Yeah.
And then breaking down a lot of those, incentive things that you just mentioned, like free cars, free cruises, like a lot of that stuff isn't free because you have to end up paying for it in some way.
Yeah.
Like a lot of, like for a cruise example, like the cruise might be free. If you don't live in the place where the cruise is docking, you have to pay for a plane ticket to get there.
Yeah.
You might not have all your food included or a bunch of other stuff. A lot of the companies that say they give you a free car, really, they just lease it in your name, and if you don't maintain your rank, then you are responsible for all the car payments.
What? That's awful.
Yeah. And then also some people, this is again like Monate.
Yeah.
It's one of those that like a lot of people are like, oh, I'm at the car rank, and they don't have the car because their credit is so bad they can't lease it.
Oh, wow.
Because like the dealership won't give it to them. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I think MLMs are really fascinating because it like appeals to humans in some way. Like even back in college, I was like, oh, I could make money from this. It's not going to take up much of my time. So I'll still have like free time to do classes and homework or whatever. And I was working at the time. But like, I don't know. I think there's something that appeals to people, especially like if you're a woman who's like at home with your kids and it's like, well, I could help make extra money at home. Like, I don't know. It's things like that.
Oh, they specifically prey on women, like I said, and especially young women and new mothers. Young women, like college kids who have never worked a 9-to-5 and don't want to. And then also new mothers. They're always like, wouldn't you like to stay home and spend time with your kids? And so I also want to make a video about like the, mixed messages that they send.
Yeah.
Because like when they're trying to get you in, a lot of the time they can be like, oh, it can be your side hustle. You can make some extra money, whatever. And then when you're not making money, they're like, well, this is your business. Did you really expect to just be able to work a business part-time and make any money? You have to be on it 24/7. Like, all of your energy needs to go towards this. So they pitch it to you as something that's really easy and can be done in your spare time. And then once you're inside and have really had all of these psychological manipulation tactics used against you, they make you feel guilty for not allocating every spare minute of your time towards this thing, and they make you think that it's your fault for not succeeding, because how could you expect to succeed at your own personal business if you're not putting 100% of your time and effort towards it? And then, of course, if you put 100% of your time and effort towards it, you're not going to be able to spend time with your kids, and you don't have time freedom because you're constantly working. So it's one of those things that's really just a big series of lies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, that's our opening video. That's thoughts on MLMs.
Yep.
Anyone who's watching this, hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe if you would like more. Like we said, we're just kind of starting out again. And then also, again, if you want to comment any MLMs that you think are interesting or you want us to look into, the research that I did for this, I'm going to link in the description below. And as I said before, if you'd like this wonderful margarita recipe, that will also be in another video that we did.
Mine's finished. It was really good.
I know, I've been trying to savor it. So, hope everyone has a great day. See you in our next video.
Bye. Bye.